Hello and welcome to the Black Hat Bushcraft channel. Today I wanted to go through the process of setting up a spring pole snare using a platform trigger. This is nothing new in the primitive trapping world, but it's just something I've been practicing on lately, something that I've done a lot of, something I think is very effective and a worthwhile technique to know in the worst case scenario where you're stuck using primitive style traps in a survival scenario. So stick with me and let's go through this trap step by step. Alright, to get started on this trap, I've collected up a few basic components that I'll need to construct the trap with. And these are materials that would be very easy to source in any woodland environment. The first two pieces that you see here are just stakes that will be driven in the ground. This will be the end that's driven down into the dirt, and where the limb came out here off the main branch will become a binding point for my trigger sticks. These two sticks here are a little smaller in diameter than my pinky, and these will become the two sticks that bind with my toggle. That creates the trigger of the trap. The toggle is just a very small twig here, which will be attached to my cordage and then attached to my spring branch. And then the last part here is just some number 6 bank line. If you wanted to beef up that cordage in a real survival scenario, obviously that may be a good choice. Nonetheless, these are the basic components. I'm going to go ahead and work on setting this trap up. Let's get started. Alright, just so I can make sure I'm setting my trap in the right spot, I'm pulling my sapling down just to get an idea on the ground whereabouts I want my trap to be set. And I put a little mark there with my boot. The next step will be to drive my stakes down into the ground where I want them to be. I'm going to put these about 3 to 4 inches apart. Now what I'm going to do is tie the loop that will become my snare. And to do that, I've taken a bite in my cordage. I have my standing end, the long end here, and I have my short end, which is the working end. And I'm going to take that working end and wrap it around, going down the cordage a couple of times. So I did it twice there. And what I'm going to do is come back up underneath of those wraps, going back up towards the standing line. And what this does is it creates a noose, but it's a knot that once it cinches down, it doesn't as easily uncinch. So you can see this noose cinches down, but it doesn't uncinch very well. But see, I'm actually pulling against that and it doesn't go back up very easily. So you actually have to purposefully loosen that loop up. And I like that with my snares because then that way it's not going to easily open up. At this point I'm going to attach my toggle to the line, and to do that all I'm going to do is make a loop over, creating a marline spike hitch. I've shown this before in other videos. And just a little bit off center, I'm going to cinch that down. I know it wasn't easy to see how I tied the actual snare loop in that last clip, so I wanted to show you on just a little bit more of a clear background. That small diameter bank line is hard to see knots being tied with. So all I'm doing here is I create a bite in my rope. And now I'm going to take this working end and I'm going to wrap around both parts of this string. So I'm wrapping around both pieces here, and I wrap twice. Once I have those two loops, I take that working end and I run back through the center, and that will create a noose essentially. I'm going to cinch that down snug. I'm not going to over tighten it because the tighter you pull here, the more the friction is going to be when you go to cinch your loop. Now I don't want that snare to bind, but at the same time I want it to be snug enough so that once this tightens down, it doesn't readily open back up. See, I'm taking my fingers and pulling apart there, but this is not sliding back up, it's binding on the cordage. Now, when I want to attach my toggle, I simply turn a loop in the line, just like that. So a bite, and I'll roll that back up the cordage on top of itself. And that's the key, is that you have to roll that loop up the line. If you go down, it's not going to work. And I pull that line back through, creating a little pocket there. That's what I'll insert my toggle in, and when I cinch that down, it will bite onto that toggle and hold nice and tight in place. And that small diameter bank line will actually bite into the wood and make it very nice and stable. And at that point, my trap is ready to attach to my spring pole, and I can set the entire trap up as I'm showing you here in the video. And when you're attaching this to the tree, there's nothing fancy to that. Just securely knot it off. That's all that it really takes. All right, so you can see I'm pulling my spring pole down by holding this toggle here. And what I'm going to do is take the short end of that toggle. You can see the cordage is slightly off center. Hopefully you can see that. And so I'm going to take that short end of that toggle and I come in from the front side and bind that underneath of this cross stick. Right, I still have to hold it in place. I'm going to throw that snare over the top and out of the way. Insert the second crossbar here, and that will give me a spot to bind my toggle against. At that point, the trap is set to some degree. So that will actually become my trigger right there. You can see I have my snare here. Like I said, I'm just going to open that loop up and throw it off to the side over top of my crossbars. Now, to actually set the trap. So you can see now my trap is set with the tension here, and it's just that the toggle is being pulled this direction and it's binding against these two sticks. And the sticks are being held in place by the stakes. So this is all just being held in place by friction, which is being promoted by this spring pole here, which you can't see in the frame. But nonetheless, that's what's happening. This is being pulled and it's cinching everything together tight. Now, with this being a set trap, I need to create a way to catch an animal. And that's what I'm going to use this handful of sticks for, is to create a platform so that when the animal steps on that platform, he sets off this trigger and hopefully gets caught within this loop. So all I'm going to do is come back in with all these little twigs and put them between these two sticks. And again, that's going to create a little step platform. When the animal pushes down on that platform with his weight, it's going to release that toggle, and that spring pole is going to do its job in cinching that noose down, or that snare that we created in the cordage. That's all I'm doing, is just positioning these things so that they create a little platform. These are all just twigs that I collected up off the forest floor, broke by hand. So really not much work there at all. It took just a minute or two to collect all of these things right within a 10-foot radius of where I'm at. So nothing fancy needed for this trap. All right, and that's the finished platform. Now all I have to do is roll this snare loop back on top of that platform and center it up. And at that point, what I would do is bait this area right here. Just take some peanut butter, whatever the bait would be, put it right here at the top of this trap. And what that creates is a scenario where the animal will have to come onto this platform to get at the bait. And when he does, he puts his foot or his head or his body within that snare. And what I would do at this time is create a barricade around the trap, just to make it uninviting for the animal to approach from any other direction than this direction. We want the animal to come in and step on this platform. There would be bait right here on the end of this toggle or on this crossbar, so the animal will want to approach here to get the bait and therefore put himself within the snare. And I'm not going to go through the trouble of really barricading this off, but just to create a visual of what that looks like. And so now I'll show you how the trap actually functions. All right, so I've got my trap all set, and I've got the snare laid out real nice right in the center of that platform. Considering that everything would be funneled, the animal will come into the center of the trap to get the bait. To get to the bait, he'll have to step on this platform. And once pressure goes down, now you can see he's snared. And that will be dangling from the tree. You should be able to see there, center screen. So it'll do a good job of dangling the animal, and hopefully pressure will create a strangling effect and dispatch the animal quickly. All right, so you can see that's an effective little trap, and it doesn't really require any special materials that can't easily be sourced in a woodland environment. Maybe the bank line, but hopefully we're already carrying cordage in our kit when we go out into the woods anyway. But if you had to make natural cordage, 2 to 3 feet would be enough, and you would just want to make it stout enough that it could hold whatever the animal is that you're targeting. Obviously, targeting smaller animals with a trap like this makes sense because you want to be able to dangle that animal off the ground. If the spring pole goes off and the animal can touch the ground, he's going to get out of that snare. But if you're able to get him up off the ground, his body weight can help to strangle him depending on how you catch him. So I think it would be a very effective trap. Again, with any of these primitive traps, the key is setting numbers of the traps, and that's why I like this one, because you could set a large number of these traps in a relatively short period of time, as long as you have that cordage as a resource. If you have to make cordage, it's going to take a while to produce that in number. But nonetheless, I'm sure you guys will be carrying a knife, which is that primary tool used to make this trap, and you'll be carrying cordage most likely. Just keep in mind that primitive trapping is almost always illegal depending on where you are in the world. So this is reserved as a survival only technique. But it's one that's worth knowing, and it's good to keep it in the toolbox. I want to thank you for your time and interest. If you haven't subscribed, please hit that subscribe button. There'll be more videos coming again very soon. And until the next one, take care and God bless.